My name is Stacy Renee. I'm a mindset coach, life coach. It's more popular, right? Life is life, and in life on life's terms ain't always easy. So, we're going to be talking today about self esteem and seeing ourselves with truth instead of fear. It's about breaking down the lies that we've told ourselves about who we are, about all the things we tell ourselves, and I know for me, when I used to get my chakras balanced, we've talked a lot about healing, and I don't do medicines. Because as you know, I'm an addict. I've got 29 years clean and sober, so I don't do medicine to keep myself stable. For me, and I'm not saying people don't need it, because some people have hormone imbalances. There is, hormone and chemical imbalances. I'm just saying that what I did was that I didn't need to. I was able to have Reiki, and so the Reiki helped me a lot. But what happened was my truth chakra is I have a truth chakra, and that would be the one that most of the time was blocked when I, first started getting my chakras balanced. And, it wasn't that I lied purposely to anybody. It was that I lied to myself about my truth. So that's what we're talking about this morning. Self-esteem and seeing ourselves with truth instead of fear, because it's what we don't see. And sometimes we've lied to ourselves. Sometimes others have lied to us, maybe not intentionally, but from their own fears. So I'm going to tell you a story today, and we're going to talk about that. So seeing ourselves with truth instead of fear. I will give y'all just a couple of minutes to get here. So when you do come on, please let me know you're here. Okay? So when you come on, let me know you're here so I know that you're here, and we'll get started. I'm going to let a few more people come on. I can tell y'all this morning what I've already been busy this morning. I got up this morning, went outside because I'm down here near Cancun, Mexico. And I got outside, and we have Ramon. It's a secret. Well, it's good to see you this morning. So I've already been out this morning. I have a ladder, and I have these bougainvilleas. And bougainvilleas, as many of you know, they're very pokey, thorny. I swear, sometimes, when I'm trying to trim those bougainvilleas up, I'm like, Jesus, that crown of thorns. I feel you, brother. I feel you, because this bougainvilleas are stabbing me down here. So, the bougainvilleas get me. Well, what they do is they scratch me, they stab me, and then what happens then? That attracts mosquitoes. So then the mosquitoes start biting me. And we have one down here called the tabano. And the tabano looks like a combination between a fly and a mosquito, because it's actually bigger than a mosquito and about a little bit smaller than a fly. And when those suckers bite you, you get a big knot on you, and it gets fever sometimes, and it just itches. So I'm just giving it a few minutes. But yeah, I already been out and cleaned up my front yard and put stuff out at the street. I bagged up 6 bags of leaves yesterday for this full moon celebration. That's 6 bags for me. Everything's symbolic. Dawn, it's good to see you this morning. Brenya, it's good to see you this morning. Brenya. So what I did was I'm letting people come on here. And then yesterday, they say put vinegar on those bites, Ramon. Yesterday, I bagged up 6 bags, indicative of each month. And so, because it's the full moon tonight, and so I am getting rid of the full moon. Good morning, my darling. It's good to see you. So, with the full moon, it's about releasing what no longer serves us. And we don't just release in one and done and that's it. You did a bad thing, Branya. What did you do? What did you do? So, you can release it tonight under the full moon. Oh no. Are you sick, sad, and sorry today? Oh, sending you much love. There's always, starting over on Monday. I think we talked about that the other day, about another day can be Monday. A lot of people say I'm going to start on Monday. Of course, tomorrow is Monday. So you don't have to go into oblivion again today, but it gets hard. And this is how we defeat our self-esteem a lot of times. And I know you must be feeling sick, and I'm so sorry that you're feeling that way, but we can change. You can start again today. You did some cannabis. Yeah, that's tempting, isn't it? Thank you for those hearts. Is that you, Kim? So We're going to get started now that you all are here. So we're talking about self-esteem and seeing ourselves with truth instead of fear. And we're going to have story time. And Mom pointed out to me yesterday that there are so many story times with Stacy on here that she has a problem finding me. So I don't know. I think we're going to call it Soulful Sunday Stories. So that's, I think, what we're going to change it to, because I went and did the research and there's at least 3 story times with Stacy's on here. It's sad because it's been 2 years that I've been clean. Well, you know, I understand that is very sad. But the good thing is that you're here today. You know, you didn't go balls to the wall, because that's, that's my fear, is if I break my clean streak, is I know that once I think, okay, you done effed up now, Stacy, I'll go, and that's what, that for me is what's kept me from doing, being tempted. But you can start over today, get you a new clean date today, and start today. It's hard, but it's just a day at a time. It's that one thing, how I was talking. Well, were you here the other day when I was talking about just that one thing, just doing that one thing, the next right thing? I know you've probably heard of the next right thing. So just staying where your hands are and doing the next right thing. That's how we stay clean. Is it's one breath at a time, 1 minute at a time. Yeah. Well, just hang in here. Hopefully something we say today will help. Okay. All right. Thank you for those hearts. I can't remember you're still baked. Whew, I can't imagine. Hello, Nicholas Venus. All right. I'm going to get started. So here we grow. So I've got my notes here so I can see your comments there. So if anything relates to you all, then please feel free to tell me in the comments. Okay. And as we know, just before we get started, we don't talk about religion, politics, my age, or dating status. Isn't there something one can take that makes one nauseous? I know, right? Yeah. All right. So good morning, y'all. Today we're going to conclude our series on self-love and self-sabotage. So that would feel like self-sabotage, right? Is when we, feel like I've done this, and then I knew better. And then, yeah, for the nauseous with alcohol, yeah, there's methadone is what, for severe, coming down and stuff. But I think we just have to write it out. And, that sickness, the feeling sick the next day is usually when I have sponsees, I ask the sponsees to write about their last high, because the last high, if we can remember our last high, we won't romanticize as much about it, right? It's our last drunk, Ramon. If we remember the last one, we won't. Thank you, Seed and Hope. So if we don't, if we forget about that last time out, we can romanticize about how, it's going to be different this time, right? It's going to be different this time. Hello, Daddy KVC. So it's remembering this last time. And, with the first step is usually just remembering, I'm powerless and my life is unmanageable. So the powerlessness comes from the mind and the obsession. And, probably Bronya has a shoulda, woulda, couldas today, and that regret. But then the compulsion is when we actually do it, when we actually get high, we actually drink, or we actually eat. That's going through the compulsion. And this is usually our escape with our central nervous system and autonomic system. So if we can remember what was happening before we started, or what we were fighting, what we're running to or from, then we can start working on what that trigger might be. So Daddy KVC, I wanted to say thanks for the advice you gave last time. It's been helping me a lot. Oh, that makes my heart happy. Thank you so much, Daddy KVC. I appreciate that. You've made my day today. So I appreciate that. So we're going to talk about today about self-esteem and seeing ourselves with our truth instead of fear. Now, seeing ourselves with our truth, a lot of this is blocked when we're codependent, because a lot of times we've been taught to perform. We've been taught to do these things without people saying, now you must perform. The court stuff was your trigger. Yeah. Yeah. Just stay clean today. Do it a day at a time. If you can, now meetings worked for me, is being able to be around people like me. For me, it worked for me. I don't know, I know some people don't like that, but for me, that's what helped me. Thank you, Seed and Hope. So, this morning, good morning, we're going to talk about this series on self-love and self-sabotage. What is sabotaging behavior? Well, keep trying. That's what successful people do, because I get it. Thank you, Daddy KBC. I get it. Today is a new day. Get up, brush yourself off, and move on. Absolutely. Dawn, when I looked good and I felt a bit confident, I would get a comment or a dig from a so-called friend that would bring me down. Aw. Yeah, not everybody is rooting for you, but if you root for you, and that's what we're talking about today, is seeing yourself with your own eyes rather than allowing other people to have that power. So we've talked about, allowing other people to have power over us, Thank you, Rodolfo. I'm glad you're here. So, which knocks you and you question yourself. Absolutely. Yeah, it's late, huh? It's getting late. All right, so I'm going to get started. And I appreciate you all for being here this morning. All those hearts and all the love. Thank you so much. Yes, Rodolfo, get back on that horse. Don't ride that white horse, but get back on the other horse. All right, so here we go. Today we're concluding our series on self-love and self-sabotage. God only gives us what we can handle. It's like school. We can get put in the classes according to ability. It's the same with God and our challenges. I know for me, I had to get a power greater than myself to pull me out of my muck. So we've talked about fear. We've talked about healing. We've talked about self-trust. Today, I'd like us to talk about self-esteem. Not the kind of self-esteem that one often talks about. It's the kind that comes from learning to see ourselves with truth instead of fear. A lot of us are anticipating and strategizing, just trying to get through, just trying to be okay. Trying to be okay. And so when we're just trying and trying and trying, that's good. Keep trying. But that's the thing, is don't give up. Keep trying. So because fear, when we start going back into that hole, when fear starts pulling us back, we start getting in lack. And, I said earlier that this is the full moon. And, that's one of the things that I give up constantly is lack, because lack is like the ascension and descension, the escalation and de-escalation, and the breath and our heartbeats, is that things come and they go, and so being in touch and one with our soul and being able to navigate through this life instead of trying to strategize and keeps our central nervous system amped up to where we are obsessive and compulsive. And so when we're able to, the biggest problem is the fear of failure. The thing is that we can learn to have a relationship with it. Self-esteem is hard to find, and it's learning to have a relationship with what we fear. Now, there are healthy fears and unhealthy fears. Certainly, fear for me is like Bronya is using. So there's healthy fears and unhealthy fears. So a healthy fear for me is using. There are some good healthy fears, but there are some unhealthy fears. And the unhealthy fears are if I'm worried about what somebody else thinks about me. That's an unhealthy fear. Unhealthy fear is if I'm not going to be able to do something that I want to do, okay. But it's just these one little steps each day that gets us to where we want to be and where we'll be okay. So, because fear distorts. It can become an obsession, but it can distort the truth of what's really happening. We can make up a story. We've talked about that, about how we can make up these stories about what's going to happen when we don't really know. So fear distorts and fear exaggerates and fear minimizes and fear compares. A lot of times we're afraid to do something because we're afraid it won't look as good as this person's, or it won't, be as good as this person did it or that person. So we've given somebody else outside of ourselves power, or we're feared because of what somebody said. At one time, somebody told me, and I'm going to tell y'all a personal story at the end of this story. So y'all hang in here. Thank you, Daddy KVC. So y'all hang in here because I'll tell you a personal story, because there was a lot of challenges that I overcome. I had somebody tell me once before that I was terrible with writing. And I write y'all content all the time. I'm not terrible with writing. So it's about overcoming, and we're constantly overcoming. We talked Wednesday about what has it we've overcome and given more attention to that. And so in wrapping it up this week, we're going to talk about that some more. I can't get through job interviews because it triggers trauma of being judged and mocked by my bullying father as a child. I begin to sweat and panic, and it creates a new trauma cycle. I hear you, Seed. And this is the thing, is that I get it. I was like that too, and I'm going to tell a story. So I hope you'll hang in here to the end, because becoming empowered, but just because we get in adult bodies, I say this all the time, just because we get in adult bodies, that trauma from childhood, that created our belief system. And so believing in ourselves, and it can also be, as Daddy KVC says, believing in source. And that's, expanding our relationships with ourself and our source helps our belief system. Now, I don't tell you who your source has to be, because there's so many people on this platform from so many different places, so we want to respect that. That's why we don't talk about religion here, because I'm not telling you who or what to believe, but I do believe in a power greater than myself. And that's what's helped me to get through a lot of things. Before I go into public speaking, if I'm going to walk on a stage and speak, I'm always like, God, go before me, because I sometimes don't know what's coming out of my mouth. So I have my notes, but then I end up feeling comfortable after a bit, and it's just like stuff starts just popping off. Anyway, so there's all these things, and that's a fear of judgment. That's one of the biggest fears, right? But fear distorts, fear exaggerates, fear compares, and fear minimizes who you really are, because each of us has a purpose here. And yes, we do fear being judged, but once we can get past that fear and have a relationship with our fears and be able to comfort our fears, which a lot of them do come from inner children, the bullying fathers. And I'm going to tell you a story about what happened to me as a child. So hang in here, Daddy KVC. Rodolfo, some confident person stole my self-esteem and I want it back. I like that. Hi, Jade. And then Mom said, hi, Jade. KVC, can we get over the fear of failure? Thank you, Tink Jade. We can let it have it less power. We're human beings. So there's a natural fear and there's healthy fear. And we have the central nervous system, autonomic system. And healing that autonomic system, what I was saying before everyone got on here, is that Reiki helped me a great deal with healing the autonomic system, because you have a ganglia chain here. It's not just woo-woo. You have a ganglia chain that runs down your back that carries all the memory that's in your mind down into your body. And just like the body keeps the scorebook, it's making a big, I've been seeing it more and more again, but the body keeps the score. Talks about how this verbal abuse, like was talked about with Daddy KVC, and with, the the verbal abuse. This sticks in your system. And so it's like, what it does is it causes us to be reactive to where we're not wanting to feel something. So sometimes we try to play small and be invisible, which isn't a sign of self-esteem. Sometimes we want to be seen and heard, but we just don't know how, because we got used to hiding. So it's about, when we have a relationship, when we develop and look at these things, why did I hide? Is this really true? Because it may not be really true. Like, I can write. I may not have best punctuation. I have pretty good punctuation, but sometimes when I get to write, and that's why I do the Chat GPT, because sometimes I get to just type and then I just throw it into Chat GPT and let it put it into the thing. And sometimes it does it right. And sometimes I fight with Chat GPT because it doesn't get what I was trying to say. It goes and changes my shit and I have to go fix it back. So anyway, John Dillerman, we don't talk about religion, politics. Thank you, Kim. Never mind. Never mind. See, yes, abuse definitely manifests in the body. I'm fully aware of that. My mother developed lupus, and I'm certain it's down to my father's abuse. Yeah. I'm sure it is too, because when you live in a toxic environment, the toxicity seeps into you. And it is I was talking earlier about the secretions. We have chemical releases. Kim was in one of my courses to where when we talked about those chemical releases. Hello, Tony. And Tink Jade, thank you. So we have these chemical releases. We have hormone releases. We have all this stuff, the adrenaline, the cortisol. But your adrenaline, when you get triggered, starts, sparking up. And the cortisol, and this is why we start getting addicted to things that are unhealthy to us, because it feels familiar. And so it makes us feel alive, because that's how we've lived our life. But when we start calming down, the Reiki helped me, the breathing helps, these kind of things. Ramon. Yes, yes, you did learn that from that course, right? Daddy KVC. Maybe I don't align with my body more. See, this is the thing is when I talked about self-esteem and self-sabotage, most of the self-sabotage is what we do to our body. You know, I talked about how we can cut off our nose to spite our face. So we're trying to bring ourselves comfort. We're trying to bring ourselves peace. We're trying to connect with spirit. We're trying. And it's usually with things outside of ourselves that end up making us, like was mentioned earlier, feel regret. Maybe we got high just to have a little bit of peace. Maybe we drank just to have a little bit of spirit. Maybe we ate something we shouldn't have eaten to have a little bit of comfort. Maybe we shopped so we could feel like we fit in, that we were good enough. Maybe we, had sex or had, felt like we had to be in a relationship so that we could have love. But see, all of this is inside of us. You eat too much, Rodolfo? So it's about, am I eating for comfort or I'm eating for nutrition? So this is what we have to figure out. So, yeah. What is psychology method to you? Think that it seems hard for you. Okay, Ahmed, thank you for being here. Oh, you're very welcome, Seed. Daddy KVC. Yeah, I use things to fill the void, so it makes sense. It's absolutely, absolutely. Is we have to learn that when we're putting things in our body to be mindful. See, the thing is we escape. We're escaping, so our mind isn't even. So what we do is we abuse our bodies, and then if we don't catch ourselves, if we don't tell ourselves the truth at some point that we're just a human being, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be these things that maybe you felt like you had to be to measure up when you were comparing yourself to somebody else. You don't have to be somebody else. Your fat has its own fat as a pet. Well, hopefully something today will help, Rodolfo, because it's about our escapism. And those things are usually reasons that we escape. And they, at first they are rewards, right? It's, I feel like having some ice cream. I was telling somebody earlier this week, I wrote myself sentences, not for punishment, but just for imprint. Because when I like something too much, I can keep wanting more and more, and I know that about me. So having that relationship with myself, and it's not like I'm walking on eggshells with myself, because I've learned how to, dance with my, some people may call it demons, but dance with the negative parts of myself. Not dancing as in threatening and teasing, but to be like, okay, I hear you. I hear you talking to me, but we are going to do this. You may be telling me do this. And some of us may think it's like when I was a kid, we had those cartoons with the angel and devil, so we have that positive and negative side of ourselves. And so we have the emotionally immature person who's our inner child that had all these wounds from childhood. So when we have these wounds from childhood, just because we get adult bodies don't mean that imprint that was in the mind that manifested into the body went away, because a child doesn't know how to adapt to these things, to this language, to these kind of things that may happen around a child. That's your problem too, Daddy KVC. You don't stop. That's right, Ramon. Dancing with the fire. Food for me is comfort, and it's like a frenzy. I know I talked about that. Remember, I talked about that on Friday night, about how when we binge, the regret that we feel after binging, and so the binging can be on many different things. Food is the easiest, right? So one thing is to make sure that we don't have foods in our house that come in a bag or a package. That's one thing. Fried food is a big no-no for hearts. You don't want to get your heart clogged. Fried food every once in a while is okay, but fried food is not good for your heart. And this is the thing, when the body keeps the score. My dad died at 58 years old. And my dad used to tell me, and this is part of what helped me, is we all know my dad was an addict. And my dad used to tell me, he would say, if I would have known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of my body, because he abused food, he abused drugs, he abused alcohol, he abused sex, he abused whatever he could abuse. And so, I heard that. I heard him say that. So my elevator didn't have to go as low because I'm an addict too. I'm not judging my poor daddy. I'm an addict too, but my elevator didn't have to go as low because I watched. He always, one of his things was to, he used to always say, I'm trying to set a good example for y'all because he was clean for 5 years with religion, but he didn't do that internal work. Learn how to dance in the fire, as Ramon said. He didn't learn how to do that. He just thought that he could just put some religion on top of those old imprints and that it would erase them. But see, when the body keeps having these imprints, the mind will keep thinking these things, even though it's not to say that the religion didn't help, because it did help. But when our self-esteem is so affected by the negativity growing up, that's where our belief system, yeah. Thank you, Daddy KVC. Yeah, because we are all humans. And see, this is the thing about with Brunya is learning to relate is when we understand that we are just people because we think we're so separate. I know I thought I was separate. And I did some throwed off stuff that I'm not proud of, in my using it. Just the mildest was this, y'all. The mildest was I would be smoking my cigarettes and getting high and drinking, and I would be in the national park and I'd throw that cigarette butt down and stomp on it. Then a family would look at me like, did she just throw her cigarette butt down in the park? And I'd be like looking at them like, yes, so, because I thought that was cool because that was my thinking back then. I don't have to be perfect. And I can tell y'all that I wouldn't do that now. I wouldn't do that now. And it's just how crazy my thinking was back in the day that I thought that was okay. And now I'd be like, and I wouldn't look at anybody like that I was looked at either, though. That's the thing. Thank you, Kim. Seed. One thing I've learned from all of this is the importance of being kind to all children. That one act of kindness can change the trajectory of that kid's life. It can literally save a life. You are so right, Seed. Thank you, Daddy KVC. How did you get past the addictions? I don't mind you asking at all, Daddy KVC. My elevator hit the last floor when I was drinking because I had two kids. I had a 2-year-old and an almost 5-year-old, and I had two kids. And I was, my dad would black out, and I started getting to where I blacked out. They would tell me that I cooked things that I really didn't cook while I was drunk, and then try to feed it to them. And that I started doing things that I didn't know. I would wake up the next day and not know that I did that. What I was afraid of was that I would put those two kids in the car with me when I was in a blackout. So the last blackout, anything could have happened to me. And I don't forget that last blackout. And so I just celebrated 29 years clean and sober. So, because I don't forget that last blackout. And even though I've lost a child, thank you so much, Don. Even though I've lost a child, again, to drugs, just because I quit using drugs didn't mean that he quit using drugs. Just because I quit drinking didn't mean he wasn't going to drink. And that's where, thankfully, my working on my codependency helped, because most of the time people relapse with it, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol. It's because other people. It's because other people, because it's hard to people. It's hard. And this is why I'm here. It's because I want you to understand that you're part of a greater whole, that there's no reason to go run and hide, that there's a lot of us. And how I got clean and sober was I finally went to the AA group. I had gone to AA and I'd gone to NA and I'd gone to ACA and I had gone to, I went to CODA once. My kids did save my life. They did. My love for my kids, because I did love my kids more than I loved myself. That's true. I eventually stayed clean because it felt good to be clean. It felt good to stay in my right mind. It felt good to know what I was doing, and it felt good to grow. Yes, Daddy KVC. I think Daddy KVC has the reason. I think, though, that Daddy KVC, is just understanding our humanness. Is that sometimes just because we get into the faith, it doesn't remove the mindset. We are saved and we aren't going to behave a different way, but it doesn't mean that what happened before didn't happen before, because we all have how my therapist explained it to me. Is she was like, because I didn't want to look back. I had a good relationship with my dad before he died. I was able to talk to him about so many things. But growing up, y'all heard me say that I couldn't talk to my dad. I was stuttered when I was a little kid because I was intimidated and I was nervous and I stuttered. And he'd say, "Come on, spit it out." Then I would write notes and then he'd say, "What is this?" And so I didn't know how to communicate with a male. And then I got a boyfriend that was my daddy catalyst, of course. And so I had to learn how to communicate. So we're never too old and it's never too late. But yeah, it was my kids in AA. I went to AA. I went back to AA and I just got a sponsor and I did what they told me to do. And the funny thing was they were just like me. Cause like y'all, I was afraid of being judged going in those rooms, AA. I was afraid of being judged, but it was where I found that comfort, where I found the comfort that we're talking about. That's where I found the peace that we're talking about. That's where I found the love that we're talking about. And it was letting people love me until I could love myself because I'd been, in the religion. I've done all kinds of things in religion, but changing my mindset and my imprint had to call for me to have coaching, therapy, these kind of things, and 12-step groups because I went to AA. You are very welcome. I went to AA and then I went to CODA because I couldn't use drugs having kids back in Texas at that time. And Texas still weed isn't legal. So I had to quit smoking weed. So I quit doing that. But drinking and guns in Texas, that's a thing. That's a thing. So drinking was okay. So I could drink, but I couldn't drink like a lady. I sure could not. And then as far as Jesus went in the wine, it's like, no, Jesus be anemic with me. With me around, Jesus would be anemic drinking Jesus' blood because I didn't stop. That's the thing. So maybe I need to change my environment. Yes, that was one thing that we learned in AA. But you start connecting. I started trusting one person in there. Hello, Mr. Goddamn. I started trusting one person in there. Then I started trusting another person in there. And then I started trusting, and I just started trusting. And I started learning to trust myself. But it took a long time to learn to trust myself. The mental competition is very powerful and intense. Well, we just have to get in. They have a saying in recovery, get in where you fit in. And so it's like, if we can connect to one person. I found this one lady when I went into AA because I went into this country little town AA group. There wasn't a lot of choices, and women are supposed to sponsor women and men are supposed to sponsor men. And so, hello. And so, this one lady had a tattoo on her hand and she, looked a little, rougher than the rest. And I thought, but she'd been sober a long time. And I thought, okay, this lady's going to teach me how to be sober. I hear you. It's hard to trust. This is, again, when we grow up in this kind of environment as a kid, that if we don't learn to trust as a kid, if things are fragmented, and it doesn't mean that our parents meant for us not to trust people, but maybe they did tell us about, maybe they were protective and tried to tell us about trust. Maybe they weren't protected and we were violated. Maybe, you just don't know. And so it don't just go away. It don't just go away. It runs our belief system in our body and our fears. And so sometimes our fears can just be triggered. Our perceptions developed. We learned how to watch for things. Like with my dad, I was telling somebody the other day, learning to trust is hard. Changing your environment and your circle of friends is helpful. Yes, because we need support. We need support. So we would know when my dad, when it was about to be on. I was telling one of my friends the other day, I said, oh, you just knew when it was about to be on with my dad because he would be drinking and his lips would get to moving. He'd be thinking about what he was going to tell you when he told you, when he gave it to you, when he so he'd be thinking, and then his hands would be going like this beside his side, and he'd be like, okay, it's about to get real. We knew. And that our bodies started learning to watch these things, right? So if you grew up in this kind of environment, you started learning how to watch and prepare when you saw these things happening. So this affected your autonomic system and your nervous system. And so you would get prepared for shit to hit the fan. Excuse my English. All right. Too many bad life experiences to put trust in others for me. I was like that too. And even when I had 5 years sober, I went to a church thing. I went to a Unity church in Fort Worth. And I went to a church thing one time. And you just did these subconscious things. You just filled out this thing. And what it told me is that I didn't trust, I thought people were bad. And I had to work on that to change my thinking, because there's in the, when people are talking about the quantum field, or people are talking about everything that you want is on the other side of what you don't want. But the thing is a lot of us, and running in fear, we don't even perceive. And our perceptions come through our eyes, nose, ears, touch, all of this, and getting back in our body. Your circle is a dot, Kim. Thank you, Daddy KVC. I'm glad it's making sense. Seating. Oh. In the past few years, I've realized that I don't remember much of my childhood. Of course, I know it's due to things that happened, but certain moments are showing up now that my daughter is 10. Yes. Yes, our kids do trigger that. My kids triggered that for me too, as I was escaping. But when I would see my kids and I started seeing some of the instances that happened in my family start happening around my kids, like dad not wanting to ride in the car with us. That was a big one, because my mom used to have to put my dad out on the side of the road. I was telling a friend about that the other night, or the other day, not really night, but I said, yeah, we used to have to put my dad on the side of the road. He would be drunk and he wanted to drive, and then he'd get mad because mom would drive. Then we'd have to put him on the side of the road and he'd get out, and then we'd have to wait for him to call back. And then we'd go home and pick up the guns while we were waiting and hide the guns and go stay somewhere else. It's just, and so this kind of thing doesn't just go away. So this trained my central nervous system. So the Reiki helped, because Reiki has us get back in our body. It helps us to know what's going on in our body when we get triggered, so that we can respond to our body and calm down rather than reach for something outside of ourselves. Don me. That's me. Find it so hard to trust anyone now. Yeah. Wish I had a role model like you in my life when I was younger. It would have helped me avoid a lot of mistakes. Well, I know, but we don't know until we know. And then that's our job, is to be a role model for others when we know better, or when we know a better way. It's not that you know better, like as in, because that could sound like punishing, right? You should know better. Because that first thing I had to learn is to quit shooting on myself when therapy. I should have done this. I should have done that. Da 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 da. Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, I'll get back to the notes. Thank you all so much. I do appreciate your participation here. It helps a lot. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, I hope you will subscribe, because I get back on here tomorrow night. Okay, so I'm always trying to get on here and to help some, because I know that this crazy world we live in right now, and it doesn't help us trust anymore, does it? So we don't even know what's real. So fear distorts, exaggerates, minimizes, compares. And fear tells us we're too much or not enough. I often ask people, did you ask for help? Like you said, when we don't trust people, it's hard to ask for help. Hey, Greg, it's good to see you. But sometimes people tell me they're afraid to ask for help because they're afraid they're going to be too much. They were told in childhood that they learned to request in anything in childhood was too much. Sometimes they feel like they're not enough. Yes, it definitely makes the first issues worse. Absolutely. So, Greg, we're talking about self-trust today, self-esteem, and, about telling ourselves the truth. So what is self-esteem? My glove, greetings. It's good to see you this morning. So I don't believe that self-esteem comes from achievements, y'all. I mean, I do, but I don't. Okay, it's about doing that one next right thing. It comes from, or it doesn't come from approval, and it doesn't come from popularity, and it doesn't come from perfection. Those things won't give you self-esteem. I believe healthy self-esteem grows when we begin to experience ourselves honestly. When we're able to look at ourselves honestly, because sometimes those lies or things that we're trying to hide, if we were taught to be inadequate, or feared that we were inadequate, which we didn't know as children what that word meant, right? So it just came out as not enough. But not enough translates into inadequacy, is I'm afraid I'm not going to be adequate, that I'm inadequate. I'm afraid that I'm incapable. Incapable. I'm afraid of this. Those are our fears. So when we get to look at that, and then we get to look at the people pleasing, what we did to prove that we weren't those things, it's like, but yes, I can achieve things. I can do things because I did this for other people. And then we feel defeated sometimes when it's like, when we get abandoned, because a lot of us are people pleasing and compromising ourselves just so we don't get abandoned, because we want love. And so we realize that all those things that we did do make us capable. They do make us strong. And if we would have applied it to ourselves, what a bad, how good we would be. Not bad as in bad, but what a bad, what we would be. Yeah, Kim, I have issues with feeling unwanted. So hopefully today will help some with that, Kim. And you and I are working on those things. Lord Zebra, it's hard to walk through all the places that your life used to be in. So you thought you'd shed a layer, maybe try on some new skin. Yeah, the problem is that, Lord Zebra, we oftentimes intellectualize that. So we just say, I talked about affirmations last week about how we can't just say if we're struggling with our bank account, if our bank account's in the negative, just say, I'm rich. Because our logic is going to say, BS, you are not rich. So the thing is to say what you're doing, those little small steps on a daily basis to affirm and seeing where that big picture is going to take you. I'm going to do this today. And this is a step towards what it is that I want, rather than trying to these extremes, because that's your central nervous system is when we go to extremes. And comparison is not only the thief of joy, it's the thief of your self-esteem. Exactly, Kim. My glove. Oh, okay, let me see. Don, my mom said, oh, your hair isn't as shiny as your sister's. Ooh. Yeah, sometimes our parents compared us, Mine really didn't compare me that much, except to my cousin Kim. Kim was bad. Kim was bad news. But yeah. So sometimes my bar didn't have to be as high to, you know. Anyway, Greg, a helicopter pilot offered me a free ride mustering cattle. Oh, that's cool. My glove. So true about comparison. It is. It's a thief. So I believe healthy self-esteem grows when we begin to see ourselves honestly. That's the good, bad, and the ugly, y'all. That's the good, bad, and the ugly. We're not as ugly as we may think we are. We're not as bad as we may think we are. And we're not as good as we try to prove to be. That just being yourself is wonderful, but we don't know how, because sometimes we were born fine and divine. You were born worthy. You were born, with these talents, gifts, and skills, but sometimes these life experiences hindered those. Kim on point, yes. Lord Zebra, but you're no tailor, you're no surgeon. None of your cuts go very straight. Every new layer you uncover reveals something else you hate. Oh, I like that. The thing is to learn to love those things, to learn to love yourself and realize that we've overcome a lot of those things that we hate. We've actually overcome it. But when we don't have a relationship, develop a relationship with it, and we feel like we're trying to overcome it, It's about learning a different language. And like those affirmations I was saying, is that we have to learn a different language to have a different experience, because we just have to learn that. We are all beautiful in our own way. I bet her hair is gorgeous too. Yeah, that was mean of her mom to do that. I don't know why some people did that kind of thing, Lord Zebra. And then you cracked your head and broke some bones. And when you glued them back together, you found you did it wrong. Okay. All right. So, truthfully, no worse than we are. We're no better. I believe healthy self-esteem grows when we begin seeing ourselves honestly. No better than we are and no worse than we are. Truthfully. Sometimes fear tells us we're failures because we made mistakes. The truth reminds us that we've all learned from those mistakes. We've learned from the mistakes, or we can learn from the mistakes. I thought it sounded like lyrics, Lord Zebra. Which song was that? So I can vaguely think of it. That's what I was thinking, though. So fear says we're broken, and truth says we've been hurt, and there's a difference. It sounds like Lincoln Park. Oh, Logic and Teeth. So there's a difference. Fear says we'll never change. Fear says it's always going to be this way. We're never going to get what we want. It's just, I keep trying. And those are things that fear says, right? It's that dialogue. So we have to learn to change our dialogue to those affirmations that are going to be more empowering, directing us to what we do want, rather than staying in that central nervous system of just trying to protect ourselves. Truth reminds us we've already changed many times throughout our lives. Grinch is just carrying on, isn't he? Good morning, Jen. How are you? Good morning. Good morning. A band from Long Island called Brand New. Okay, I will try to look that up. Brand New is the band from Long Island, and the song was called what? Oh, Same Logic and Teeth. Same Logic and Teeth. All right, so I will check that song out. Ramon, are you checking that song out? All right. So seeing ourselves through the fear. We have to develop a relationship with that fear instead of trying to run from it. Most of us are trying to run from it, and that's how we end up in self-sabotage, is we're running to something that we're hoping is going to make us feel better. But it usually causes regret, right? When we overeat, when we go and get high and we didn't want to, or drink against our own will. That's how you know you're an addict or alcoholic, is when you're drinking and using against your own will, or maybe even eating from your own will. You like Bruno Mars, Don? I like a lot of folks. I like a lot of the old school people. So seeing ourselves through fear. Ask yourself, when I think about myself, whose voice am I hearing? Do you hear your mom telling you about your hair when you go to fix your hair? You need to be your own gentle parent. This is something that in ACA that they talk about, is learning. That's adult children of alcoholics, but it can also be adult children of dysfunctional families. And that's about learning to gently parent yourself so that you can heal the inner child that's trying to protect you from those wounds. And, you can become, so you get harmony in between the inner child and the adult child. All right. Congratulations, my glove. That's good to hear. You're going to lose weight. I suggest having sugar around. I didn't realize how much sugar was in alcohol. And I'm not saying to become a sugar addict, but if you don't want to drink, a lot of times there's sugar. I quit drinking when I was pregnant with my son. And, yeah. And I was craving a lot of sugar, and I ended up having gestational diabetes because I didn't know that I didn't know. And they always have, if you do go to AA meetings, usually they're going to have some sugar there, but the thing is you have to watch. And transference of addiction, when people have had food addiction, you have to watch out for alcohol addiction. If you manage to, people sometimes will have the surgeries. Sometimes they're on their GLP-1s, but then you have to manage the alcohol because it takes less alcohol for you to get a buzz, but the craving is still there. And so, because the white flour and the sugar will, yeah. Don Woodland Mikes has a lot of weight around his middle, and his face is always red. Well, he drinks a lot, doesn't he? I'm not sure. Yeah, that's the alcohol. Yeah. So, seeing ourselves through fear. Ask yourself, when I think about myself, whose voice am I hearing? Whose voice are you hearing, Don, when you fix your hair? Gently parent yourself and find things about your hair that you do like. Because your mom, she don't have the power anymore. So taking away that power, remembering you have the power. And so when, if you're overweight, saying to yourself, you know what, I'm not going to eat this today. When I go to the grocery store, I'm not buying that bag. I'm not buying that. Yeah, sugar is an alcohol. It is. I'm not buying that bag. I'm not buying that package. And that is empowering, is when you do that one time, then you do it again, then you do it again, is saying that I'm not buying it. I gave somebody sentences the other day, just like I gave myself sentences, because I went, as they say in Texas, hog wild and pig crazy on some Bluebell ice cream. And I ate way too much Bluebell ice cream, and I had regret. So I wrote my sentences. Y'all see, I always got a notebook in front of me. I got my sentences out. I will not eat Bluebell ice cream. I will not eat Bluebell ice cream, not as a punishment, but because when I write things down, I remember. That's why. Not as a punishment. I know in school they made you write it as a punishment so you would behave right, but no. I have to write things down to remember. All right. So whose voice am I hearing? Is it mine? Is it someone else's criticism, someone else's disappointment, someone else's blame? Am I seeing myself through the eyes of fear or the eyes of truth? Greg Wooldridge. I ate once every 23 hours. I lost a lot of weight and feeling great. Right. You quit. You started watching your food and your drinking and your smoking and all of that. Because yeah, sometimes this stuff it's going to hit us later if we don't, we can be proactive and do it now, or we can do it later. I had a sponsor that used to say that, putting the money to coins. Awesome. That's a good investment. When I quit smoking cigarettes, that was 34 years ago. And when I quit smoking cigarettes, I started buying candles and hand lotions and things because I like the smell of my hands after I quit smoking. Rodolfo. My statistics professor in college said that writing things down was important for learning. It really is. It really is. It's that imprint. Because, what's pen do? It prints. It's the imprint. So imprinting that, I used to tell people when I worked with people having surgery, whether it be weight loss or plastic surgery, I would tell them instead of sabotaging, put head to paper rather than hand to mouth, because that's usually the way we sabotage is hand to mouth. All right. That's excellent, Greg. Good news. Very good news. So seeing ourselves through truth. Truth doesn't ignore our shortcomings. It doesn't. We're not denying that, I developed this. We look at why we developed it. Then we can have more information about ourselves, because the best adventure we're going to take is the one to ourself, ourselves, and our soul. See, a lot of times those self-sabotaging buries our soul. It will bury your soul. That's that shoulda, woulda, couldas that sets on your soul. And all of that, when we stop doing the shoulda, woulda, couldas and we don't feel defeated, we're able to start feeling empowered by removing one thing at a time. It's not that you can just lift it all at one time and then you're going to feel great the next day. It is an adventure, because you get to look at, oh, isn't that interesting? After all this time, I just remembered this. But the thing is as you empty the stuff that was weighing heavy on your soul, and you notice those words, weighing heavy, it does oftentimes comes from food. And so when we get those lifted off, we can start seeing things that were more fun about our childhood, about our experiences today, rather than trying to strategize and anticipate the fears. So truth doesn't ignore our shortcomings. I had to learn what my shortcomings were. I had to learn what my fears are, and then how my shortcomings were, because my fears was what I was afraid of. My shortcomings was, what did I do when I got in fear? Did I behave passive aggressively? I did, and I had to own that. But that is empowering to own. I behaved passive aggressively when I felt fear of somebody getting what I want or losing what I had. Because that's what most human beings, when we realize our human beingness, is that's what most of our fear is about, is that somebody wants what we got, or that somebody's going to get what we got, or we're going to lose what we have. So when I could learn that these are where my fears were, and I had to learn what my learned behavior was. Was it jealousy? That was a learned behavior for me. So I had to learn about my own jealousy, which is my jealousy and which jealousy belonged to mama, right? So I had to learn the difference between my thoughts and my parents' thoughts. That's the wisdom to know the difference if you do the serenity prayer, the wisdom to know the difference. So truth doesn't ignore our shortcomings. Truth also doesn't ignore our gifts, though. All these things that we did to overcome things. Cut a buddy loose, that one that owes me dollars, knowing him. He's not going to pay. Getting rid of him was the best decision I've made. Yeah. It's so sad that some people will not pay you. I'm there too. I have a few people not paying me right now. And one that hadn't paid me for a year, that owed me money for a year, and they're not going to pay. It's just about, they're not going to pay. And it's about being able to let go of that and not feel like a victim. Because I know the one that didn't pay me from a year ago ain't paying nobody. There's like 13 of us on a list that, and they owe them a lot more than they owe me. So I have to feel relieved that that's all they owe me. But sometimes people aren't going to pay us, that, and so it's just, accepting it with love. How sad it must be to walk around owing all these people money, and I can live with my integrity even though somebody owes me money, right? It's just like, I know not to expect Why do they owe me money? Well, they owe me money for a plane ticket and they owe me money for a week's work. But they paid me $250 out of the $1,300 that they owed, and they actually jacked me $250 because they make stuff up and they jack everybody $250 or at least sometimes more. And so that's just their unethical business practices. So we just dust our feet off and move on. And then in the future, we learn better. We learn from our mistakes. Karma will get them. They will. Because people aren't living in their integrity when they're not doing people right. And so it's about just keeping our own side of the street clean is something that we're always saying. Don, look, Marilyn Monroe wasn't she? Yes, she did. You're right, Don. She did. It's that feeling of not being good enough. I don't think that she ever felt good enough, right? My glove. On the note of karma, the people he was staying with stole it from him. Well, that's what happens, right? That's what happens. Is that when you do this kind of things consciously, I believe everybody has that God seed in them or consciousness in them. And you're consciously going to defeat yourself because you don't deserve if you're taken from other people. Some of the other people that got taken from had children, and that's not cool. And you can't take from other people and their children and expect good things to come to you, even if you use the name of God. And that's what they do. And that's kind of disgusting. So anyway, enough about that. But, it's just about keeping our own side of the street clean and just doing the next right thing. And we know in the future, we just learn. So sometimes we focus too much on our weaknesses. I can't. I've worked with people when they would tell me in the beginning, I can't. I just don't think I can. I can't. Because that was the imprint that they got growing up, was that they were taught that they had a learning disability. So they thought that they couldn't, but they had actually proved how smart they were. This person's smarter than I am when it comes to technology. They had proved that they were smart enough, but they still had that imprint, I can't. Is anybody else here like that? So, because their parents had them believing that they couldn't, that they, so sometimes we focus too much on our weaknesses that we overlook our strengths. That isn't humility, that's imbalance, y'all. And so truth allows us to acknowledge both. This is where we come into harmony. That's where we all want acceptance. I heard us say earlier, we're afraid of being judged. The opposite of judgment is acceptance, right? And so we've talked about acceptance. Sometimes we know that not everybody has our back. But we don't have to not trust everybody. When we learn to trust ourselves, and that's what we're talking about, is learning to trust ourselves, because sometimes when we've trusted the wrong people, it makes us not want to trust ourselves. But when we start learning what our intention and motivation is, was my intention of giving somebody money, was it to it was to help them out, but did I have it to give? I've been stolen from many times at work, mad rented in homes. It's not nice. It is not nice. It is not. It just helps us to understand these. When we look at the personalities, when we're able to look at, okay, what did I want from this person? What did they show me about themselves? Because usually people are showing us who they are, or they may have some history and some we just may ignore. And so it's about us it's when we learn to trust ourselves, we learn to trust our instincts, because we have instincts, but we have to heal the central nervous system and autonomic system so that we're not trying to anticipate and strategize, so that we can be really present at the time. So healing that stuff calls for us to feel our feelings when we do get ripped off, to look at that and say, why did I trust this person? Why did I want to trust this person? And then sometimes some of the things that happen, it's like, I wanted them to take care of this for me. I wanted this. And now I learned that I'm capable of doing that, because in the end, I ended up doing that. I ended up overcoming whatever it was. So truth allows us to not acknowledge both. I've made mistakes. Trusting the wrong people, but I've learned. I know that I've learned certain things that, with the person that's, got me last time, that they won't be able to get me again. I've learned how to trust my instincts a little more. Our trust in our instincts isn't a one and done. Our learning to trust our instincts is something that we do over and over, but we have to learn to gather the evidence that we are doing the right thing. We have to gather evidence that we are doing the right thing rather than continuing to go back and to repeat, like I talked about on Friday night. We don't want to keep repeating the same mistakes, so we want to get it out of our mind, is what we want to do. We need to heal from it. What was I trying to get out of that? Because we only do something for a payoff. And when we understand what we were trying to, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. And so when we understand what was I trying to get out of that, then we can understand where our flaw is, where our shortcoming is. An example of this is like this, I married my ex-husband twice. Twice, okay. The second time I married him, I think I was wanting him to take care of me. He takes very good care of our daughter, and I think I wanted him to take care of me that way. When I did my own inventory, now he has his own flaws. He has his flaws. I don't need to air his stuff out here. But the thing is that I wanted him to take care of me. Is it wrong that I wanted him to take care of me? Is it right that I wanted him to take care of me? I just know that's what I wanted, but that's not what happened. And so it was the opposite, not mentally, not emotionally, not spiritually, not physically. It just didn't happen. He did in the beginning, but not later. So I didn't stay true to myself. Does this make sense? I did not stay true to myself, but I am now true to myself. And I wish him the best. I'm not mad at him because he is who he is, and I am who I am. Same with the person who ripped off my glove. They're who they are, and my glove is who my glove is. No, it's about what's holding on to it going to help you with. What is holding on to it? Understanding your feeling of what happened and what didn't happen so that you can heal and know what you need to do for you. Not to protect yourself, just to see, okay, this is what I wanted. This I didn't get. So this is what I know. And this is what, I know to look for and what is true and what's not true. Good morning, Shadian. Greg, we had a horrible drought. Some farmers couldn't afford to pay me. Every farmer paid 12 months later when times got better. That's good to know, Greg. That is good. See, sometimes people will pay you back eventually when you least expect it. Live, love, dreams. Either I feel like an a-hole or I lose respect for not saying no. See, that's when we look at our whys once again, like I did in my second marriage. Is it when I had to do my inventory on why did I get married a second time, and it was like I wanted him to take care of me. I'd been taking care of myself for 10 years. I was just fine. But when we lost our son, we trauma bonded back together and we just weren't compatible. We just were not. But that trauma bond pushed us back together when we lost our son, and we just wanted to do better for our daughter. But the thing was we were still the same people. And so when we understand that people are just people and that it's not a reflection of who I am. See, this is where self-esteem gets distorted, is when we think that the way somebody else behaves is a reflection of who we are. And see, when we learn to love ourselves and not depend on that love to come from somebody else, and I had to learn this, I would get my heart broke and I would lose a lot of weight when I got my heart broke, because I did the opposite. And so I would lose a lot of weight when I would get my heart broken. My therapist had to tell me, Stacy, that love is inside of you. And I learned how to love myself. I sometimes make some bad decisions. I sometimes make mistakes, but I'm human. Epic. Nobody wants to own up to being a bad person. Always someone else's fault. Well, some people are like that, and that you can't be empowered if we blame somebody else. We can't be empowered. And just because somebody blames us, don't mean that we have to take that blame on. And that's where self-esteem steps in. Is sometimes we give our self-esteem away. John London, hello. It's good to see you. Hey, Rodolfo. Yes, I got a clip in my hair this morning. So, all right, I'm going to get back to the notes. John London, we're digging deeper. We're finishing out the self-esteem, and you're lucky you haven't missed the stories yet. I've got 2 stories, male and female, because we have everybody here. I want to relate to you all. So, seeing ourselves through truth is that, sometimes when we focus too much on our weaknesses, we overlook our strengths, and that isn't humility, that's imbalance. And truth allows us to acknowledge both. I've made mistakes and I've learned. I've been hurt and I've healed. I've struggled and I kept going. That's both. So we're not just either or, we have both. And when we realize we got both, we can be in harmony with what is rather than wishing something was different than it is. And that's going to be a part of grief. So you may have to grieve. You can't get to, okay, wishing something was different because we've been longing for something to be different. We have to grieve what was so that we can understand what it is that we need, what it is that I wanted. And so that I can be like, okay, well, I have that inside of me. Patty Mac, if it's decent and if it's not too far off topic, because we stay on topic up in here. Okay, so our gifts. One thing I've learned is that healing allows me to uncover and realize the gifts that are mine. No gifts I have to earn. I do not have to earn gifts. And it's not a tit for tat and a this for that. I don't have to be afraid of receiving that I'm going to have to feel obligated to somebody else. Do I need it? Am I coming from lack? This is, I told you all the full moon is tonight. I've got 6 bags of trash sitting out at the road of leaves that I raked up. And with each bag of leaves, I metaphorically thought, because I do stuff intentionally now and not just like fussing the whole time I'm raking up leaves. I'm like, oh, each leaf in these bags is the pieces of lack that have held me back from getting and being where I want to be. And it's a journey and it's adventure, and I'm not going to get there tomorrow, but I just these little things. So I'm releasing what no longer serves me, whether it's thoughts, whether it's, the same thing, of hearing these things that other people say that don't serve my soul, continuing to have boundaries and to help myself and others grow, is it's not just a one and done. But there's not some place that, life is an adventure, not a destination. There's many destinations. And then when we get there, it's like if we develop in our self-esteem, it's like, oh, I got here. Now where can I go? Now what can I do? Because life is meant to be lived and not in fear. So healing allows me to uncover and realize the gifts that are mine. You have gifts. When you uncover that stuff that's on your soul, you'll realize what your gifts are. Your childlike self knew those gifts when you were a child. You inherited gifts just as much as you may have inherited addictions or genetics. You've inherited gifts. It's about the happiness of the pursuit, not the pursuit of happiness. That's very interesting. You can ask on. So our gifts. The one thing I've learned is healing allows me to uncover and realize the gifts that are mine, not gifts that I have to earn, not gifts that someone else gives me, the gifts that have always been there. Sometimes fear hides them, sometimes shame covers them, and sometimes comparison binds them. John London. That's a Zen monk meditation in action, like when they rake their gardens. Absolutely, absolutely, John London. And I'm going to get out there under that full moon tonight with I have a magic carpet, my little rug, and my sage, because you sage under a full moon, and sage is symbolic of cleansing. So it's cleansing my thoughts, cleansing my actions, my words, my deeds, so that I can be aligned with, the moon. And the moon is like big, and it's to reveal to you things that you can't see in the dark. All of us have some darkness in us, darling. We all have some darkness, or we wouldn't be drawn to watching these crazy things on TV and all of this. It's not, it's just about loving ourselves and loving our life and knowing when to limit certain things, when to limit the food, when to limit the 48 hours, when to limit the things that are not good for our mind, body, and soul. It's not to punish ourselves. It's just to limit that. If we want to be unlimited, sometimes we have to have limits. It's about not being an either or. It's about, exploring both things. Life is unlimited, but we have to realize what the limits are. You have to get comfortable with your no's to be able to, for people to respect your yeses, like Lisa Nichols says. So sometimes fear hides your gifts, sometimes shame covers them, and sometimes comparison binds to them. But they're still there. You still have your gifts. When we stop comparing ourselves, we have room to appreciate what we uniquely have to offer. Epic. Nice question, Patty Mac. Thanks for your invaluable contribution. I think that that's kind of like what I just answered, is that we understand that there's limited and unlimited, and sometimes we have to understand limits to have unlimitedness, and sometimes we have to understand, that it's not either or, it's both. John London, I have mosquitoes where I live, so no outdoor moon prayers for me. I know it might, they say the sage is supposed to keep the mosquitoes away. I may be running back out, running in. You're so right, John London, because here's the thing is this morning, before I got on here this morning, we have bougainvilleas here. And I have to trim the bougainvilleas because the neighbors don't like them to come over there. So I have to trim them. And what this calls for is me to get cut. It's kind of like that thorns. I mean, they are thorns. And so they cut me and they poke me. Then guess what happens, John London? After I trim those bougainvilleas and they stab me and cut me, the mosquitoes come. They like that blood. And so we have a mosquito down here called a tabano. And it's like a combination between a fly and a mosquito. And when it bites you, you get a knot on you. Anyway, I'll get back to topic. But yeah, I feel you on the mosquitoes. So self-esteem is connected. Self-love, self-trust, self-esteem, they're all connected. So when I choose love over fear, I begin trusting myself. When I trust myself, I begin to see myself differently. And when I begin seeing myself truthfully, healthy self-esteem naturally grows. Okay. All right. Y'all ready for story time? Y'all right on time. So here we grow. Here we grow. We're going to watch the story, listen to the story. Now I have a female version and a male version. Okay. All right. So there once was a little girl named Anastasia, and perhaps there was a little boy named Andrew too. That's going to be Andrew, the boy said. So Anastasia was a free spirit. She believed she could do anything. Sounds bad. I had one of those horseflies nearly bite me. Oh, the struggle is real. Yeah. And it's hot. It's hot where you are. It's hot where I am. We are all sweating over here all over the world. So she believed she could do anything, Anastasia did. She danced before she could walk. And once she started dancing, she never wanted to stop. She loved playing with her brothers, climbing trees, asking questions, laughing and dreaming. She wasn't afraid of people. She stood up in front of meetings and spoke. She was curious about everything and wanted to understand how life worked. She simply showed up as herself for a while. Little by little, life began teaching her something different. When she asked questions, she was often told she asked too many. At church, when she was searching for understanding, she was told to just have faith and not question, to believe without knowing. Her reality often felt different from what she was being told. She learned to doubt her own perceptions. One day, she wanted to enter a dance competition. She was excited. She loved to dance. But she was told there would be many girls there, and her dad didn't want her to be disappointed. Her parents couldn't find the competition. As a little girl, she didn't understand what had happened. What she made it mean was this: they don't believe I'm good enough. Because children don't think like adults. They don't separate circumstances from themselves. They make meaning. And the meaning she carried was that maybe she wasn't enough. And like many little girls, she dreamed of becoming a model or an actress. But as she grew older, she began comparing herself to other girls. Okay, McGlove, good day, okay? You have a good one. I'm glad that you popped in. But as she grew older, she began comparing herself to other girls. They seemed prettier, smarter, more confident. She began believing there was something missing in her. Sometimes she simply showed up as herself and people looked at her differently. She began wondering if she was weird. if she should be different, if she should be less herself and more like everyone else. She wanted to speak, but she stuttered. Instead of finding her own voice, she learned the language she had been surrounded by: insecurity, jealousy, fear, comparison, even lies. Eventually, she searched for things outside of herself to fill what was empty inside. She drank looking for spirit. She ate looking for comfort. She shopped looking for beauty. And men looking for love. She always was searching for enough. But enough never came, because the emptiness wasn't caused by a lack of food, beauty, money, men, or success. It came from believing the lies that had quietly replaced the truth. She also had learned a lack mentality. If she had something, she feared it would disappear, so she used it up. Food, alcohol, money, men, as though tomorrow might never come. Fear always whispered that there wouldn't be enough. Eventually, she realized she had been running further away from herself instead of toward herself. She sought help, not because she was broken, but because she wanted to understand. As she healed, she began recognizing something beautiful. The lies were never her identity. They were only beliefs she had learned. Little by little, she remembered the little girl who once loved to dance. Today, she still dances. Not because she's trying to win a competition, not because she's trying to prove anything. She's dancing like no one's watching. And the people who do watch smile because the joy is contagious. She found her voice. This little girl who once stuttered now speaks in front of groups, on stages, and into cameras. She expanded her language. Instead of repeating lack, she began speaking about possibilities: healing, gratitude, love, and hope. She even had opportunities to model and act. She enjoyed the experiences, but she realized something. Her greatest gift wasn't pretending to be someone else. Her greatest gift was finally being herself. Even as a little girl in 5th grade, she painted a bright green bird with blue-tipped wings. Years later, a real green bird with blue wing tips came into her life. Sometimes life has a beautiful way of reminding us who we've always been. And as she continued healing, she stopped trying to prove she was enough. She realized she already was. Her survival skills became tangible tools. Her struggles became wisdom. Her fears became compassion. Her wounds became places where light could enter. And today she helps other people remember who they are, not by telling them who to become, but by helping them uncover the gifts that have always been theirs. Because self-esteem isn't seeing ourselves as better than we are. It isn't pretending we're perfect. Self-esteem is seeing ourselves with truth instead of fear. And when fear no longer tells our story, truth finally has room to speak. Now we're on to the little boy named Andrew. Andrew and Anastasia. Andrew was very adventurous. He was curious about everything and wasn't afraid to ask questions. He loved exploring, building things, playing outside, laughing, dreaming about all the things he wanted to do someday. He believed he could do anything. He simply showed up as himself. And for a while, little by little, life began teaching him something different. When he asked questions, he wasn't sometimes told he asked too many. He learned that being sensitive wasn't very manly. Sometimes he was told to toughen up, stop crying, or get over it. He learned that showing feelings could make him look weak. So he stopped showing them. He learned to carry them instead. As he grew older, he began comparing himself to other boys. They seemed stronger, more athletic, more confident, and more popular. He began wondering if something was wrong with him. He wanted people to accept him, so he tried harder. Sometimes he became whoever he thought people wanted him to be. He learned to hide parts of himself that felt vulnerable. Eventually, he searched outside of himself for what he thought he was missing. Maybe through alcohol, maybe through work, maybe through achievement, maybe through success, money, control, or always needing to appear strong. But no matter what he accomplished, it was never quite enough, because what he was searching for wasn't outside of him. It was buried beneath the years of believing he wasn't enough. Hello, Viola. The little boy was curious. The little boy who cared deeply. The little boy who wanted to understand. He had never disappeared. He'd simply been covered by fear. It helped him remember who healing didn't make him become someone different. It helped him to remember who he had always been. His struggles became wisdom. His sensitivity became compassion. His courage wasn't pretending he had no fear. Today he helps others by simply being himself. Because real strength isn't pretending that we don't hurt. Real strength is having the courage to heal, and that's where healthy self-esteem begins. Not by seeing ourselves through fear, but by seeing ourselves with truth. That's a low self-esteem too, Dackelboo. So I hope that you'll rewatch this video. We're almost through. So maybe your story doesn't look like Anastasia's. Maybe it looks more like Andrew's. Different circumstances, the same fears, the same longing to know you're enough. So in closing, I hope that this helps a little bit, Dackelboo, but come back and watch the whole thing if you can, because then you might understand more why you think that. It doesn't mean that you are that. It just means that, why do I think this? You know, why am I thinking this? Because you probably are overachieving. And so sometimes when we're overachieving, it will still feel like I'm not doing enough. Because then our central nervous system's running the show, and our mind's, saying not enough, and we're trying not to feel that not enough. We're too focused on that. So what we've been talking about today is about accepting both, not trying to fight one side and run to another side, and getting comfortable in our own skin from within. So I want to leave you with a few questions before we get into our breathing. We're going to get into the breathing, and that helps you to get in your autonomic, your nervous system, your central nervous system, to where you're calm, where you feel safe, where you're not anticipating and strategizing, but you're just sitting still. Be still. You know that saying, be still and know. You just be still and know, that you're safe and protected, divinely directed. So I'd like to leave you with a few questions. When you look at yourself, are you seeing yourself through fear? A lot of us don't recognize fear. We think that fear is our reality. But once we can name it, I was told in recovery to name it, claim it, bless it, and let it go. I don't have to keep carrying around this feelings of pee and repeat. I don't have to keep doing that. Name what it is, because I didn't know as a child when I felt insecure that I felt insecure. I didn't know that I felt inadequate. I know that I felt fear. So this is why our central nervous system runs and our autonomic system runs, because the autonomic is like the automatic. So when we get triggered, it's an automatic reaction. So what evidence do you have today that you've grown? What gifts have always been yours that fear has kept hidden? Thank you, Ramon. And what would change if you begin honoring those gifts instead of questioning them? So remember, healthy self-esteem isn't pretending that we're perfect. It's accepting our humanity. It's recognizing our gifts. It's acknowledging our growth. It's allowing the truth to become louder than fear. And I believe when we begin seeing ourselves truthfully, we stop giving fear the final say. Are y'all ready to breathe, darlings? Was this helpful today? I don't know how many of y'all stayed here because the people came and went. So who all's still here? Let me know who all's still here and if you're ready to breathe, darlings. Was this helpful? Did anybody relate to either of those stories? Thank you, Rodolfo. Thank you. Jen, thank you. Viola, I started and you're still here. All right, thank you. Thank you all for still being here. Ramon, all right. It's like attendance. Who's in the house? Grinch, you gonna come breathe with us? Come on. Come on. Come on, Grinchy. All right, here we go. You ready to breathe, darling? All right, let's breathe, darlings. I hope that that was helpful, and I hope that you will remember your self-esteem. If you ever, if you need a one-on-one coaching, feel free to email me. Kim put my email in the comments, but it's also in the description. Yes. Grinch bit my tongue yesterday. Oh my gosh. It ain't nothing nice. Anyway, let's breathe, darlings. Let's take a deep breath in. Hold it. And release. If you can't hold it for 4 counts, that's okay. Just do your best. Just try to get focused, centered, and be still and be here now because you're safe. Everything's fine and divine. So we're only doing 5 of these, so we got 4 more to go. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Breathe. Hold it. And release gently and slowly out of your mouth. Let's do 2 more. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Last one. Breathe. Hold it. And release. Alrighty. Hey, Don, I'm glad that you're still here too. Are y'all ready to have a super Sunday? Was that good? Do y'all feel safe and protected and divinely directed? Grinch and I do, don't we, Grinch? I don't know the topic for tomorrow night yet. If any of you have any ideas for the topic, please feel free to put them anywhere in the comments, either this video or any, because I usually check those by the day. Super Sunday, Rodolfo. All right, then. Y'all have a good one. I'm going to be in this house all day long. I'm going to create content. I'm creating content for tomorrow night, Monday night here. I'll be here at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm also going to be creating content for my subscription on Facebook. So if you don't follow me on Facebook, feel free to follow me on Facebook. I have a subscription. We're going to be meeting twice a month unless it's a holiday. And that means Thanksgiving. We know that because it's usually Thursdays. Okay, so twice a month on Thursday evening, BOA. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. So, if you want one-on-one coaching, that's my email's in the description also. And yeah, if you want to support the channel, you can do that. The email's in the description also. So I guess Grinch and I are ready to go, and we hope you have an amazing Sunday. Thank you so much, Kim, for moderating. You're the bomb diggity. I love you. Thank you so much. Grinchy does too. Mama, Grinchy loves you too. Do the Carol Burnett thing. You have a good day too, Jen. All right. Thank y'all. Yes, thanks to Kim for moderating, keeping the craziness out of the house. Thank y'all. Love you. Have a great Super Sunday. I'll see y'all later. Bye. Yes. Yes,